Hey everybody, looks like the waiting room is made it inside. I'm sure people kind of keep trickling in from the transition, but wanted to welcome everyone here to the book club on Meet the Experts with Dr. Kundu, author of The Power of Student Agency, Looking Beyond Grit to Close the Opportunity Gap. We are thrilled to have him join us in this sort of format virtually. We'll basically give Dr. Kundu some time to frame a little bit around his book, and then you can use the chat feature to drop any questions in, as well as reactions. And I'll try and call on you as well if you want to get on the mic. And we'll take it from here. Dr. Kundu, I'll pass it to you.
Sure, Chris. Thumbs up. You can still hear me? Great. Really happy to be here, everyone. Exciting to be able to put together a session and work with Chris, who I've collaborated with over the last couple of months. We put together a collaborative concept map of student agency. And my name is Anindya Kundu. I'm a sociologist. Specifically, I study educational contexts and student achievement, but from the kind of perspective of looking at the social and cultural supports that students need to thrive. My book, The Power of Student Agency, actually profiles 50 young people who have navigated to college and career success out of extreme poverty in New York City. And so with those kinds of factors, the associated at-risk factors, which I like to consider at-potential factors of my sample, include things like coming from broken families, experiencing homelessness, incarceration, potentially gang involvement, substance abuse, undocumented status. The list goes on. And yet these young people became by traditional means academically and professionally successful. And so my work looks to challenge deficit perspectives and ask the question, what was the success possible? Giving voice to these young people who I profile, specifically uncovering the kinds of social and cultural support systems and factors that allowed them to tap into their inherent student agency. And so that's why it also says looking beyond grit, because all of these young people have tremendous grit. I think that's the case with a lot of our young people who have a lot of diverse needs. They have grit, they have resilience. Sometimes it looks like they're taking care of siblings after school. And so maybe it's not the type of grit we're accustomed to looking for or recognizing. And so that's a part of the conversation too, is how can we start to notice, what grit and tenacity and resilience look like from a social perspective. And so the book is really about collective responsibilities to help all students tap into their inherent agency. And I'm excited to spend this quick 25 to 30 minutes with you all talking about it.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for that, Dr. Kundu. We'll open it up just because we do have a limited time here. Does anyone here have a immediate burning question? You would drop in the chat or just unmute yourself.
You want to start us off, Chris?
Sure.
Throw me an alley-oop.
I'll throw you an alley-oop. So you profile a range of students, and I think the real-world nature to it is really powerful. Is there one or two that really just jump out for you that just really this kind of, brings it all together? From our work together on identity and agency, I think I saw a lot of that kind of interplay on kind of the signals back to students and how they see themselves in the world, and then kind of their own agency that comes with that. But we'll love, out of the 50 individuals, one or two that really pop for you.
Yeah. So, I think all of them are great case studies in this idea of agency and what educators can do, communities can do to locate various forms of giftedness. But one story I like to share for those who are unfamiliar with my work is the story of Jay Stud. He was a young Black male who grew up in a single parent household in Queens, Jamaica, Queens. His mom and his grandmother raised Jay Stud, and he grew up in this neighborhood that was, low resource, low income. He had to walk by gangs on his way to school, and he also got into trouble a lot as a kid. He was involved in like these play fighting gangs, he used to say, and as a result of all of this, he was what I would say is tracked towards special education up until about 10th grade. And in 10th grade, that's when one of the experiences he told me that kind of changed the trajectory of his educational and professional pathway was that his 10th grade English teacher noticed that Jay Stud would sit in the back of class and just scribble away furiously at a notebook all day. He wouldn't participate in the discussions or do much of his homework, but he would just constantly be writing in this notebook. And so at this moment, the teacher one day decided after school to ask him, "Hey, could I look at your notebook? Like, what is it that you're spending all this time writing in an English class?" And so, reluctantly, he showed her, and she saw pages upon pages of really eloquent rap lyrics, lyrics that were full of, metaphor, allegory, and had a good concept of literacy. And so that's one point where I would say she kind of noticed that he had an interest in something else. She also noticed this more latent form of giftedness. And then it was what she did next that I think provided a pathway for him to start to buy into his education. She had a friend who actually, as for a hobby, also recorded some music at a recording studio. So she told Jay Stud, "If you start coming to my class, I'll put you in touch with my friend. He'll take you to the recording studio sometime," a resource that he wouldn't have had access to. "Go record a few songs, and maybe you could put it on a CD or something." And so Jay started going to class. He did his homework. He, started realizing how, like, the teacher started seeing where there were competency gaps, and she held up her end of the bargain. He got to go to the recording studio, record some songs. He performed one in front of his classmates and got a standing ovation. And that was a memory, that high school memory, that he told me is kind of something that changed the course of his life. The reason I tell Jay Stud's story, if we're trying to think about what agency looks like, is because the story doesn't stop there. At the recording studio where he went, some of the mentors showed him the equipment, and they were like, "You know what, come by anytime you want." They became mentors to him. He spent a summer there, and he realized he was really interested in helping out with like the bookkeeping and finances. And so then he decided he would get an associate's degree in financial accounting. And then he got an internship at a bank, because at this point he started to learn how to ask for help, how to find mentors, and the bank paid for his bachelor's degree. Fast forward 10 to 12 years, Jay Stud is now managing director at one of the largest financial institutions in New York City. And so all of that to say is that one teacher's combination of providing Jay Stud cultural capital by noticing and awarding his interests, and social capital by giving him a pathway into the recording studio. That's the kind of blend. If we can bring that kind of relationship base to education, it can change students' lives. And the last thing I'll say about Jay Stud is agency is reproductive. He still chooses to live in Jamaica, Queens, even though his commute is longer, because now he dresses in a suit every day and he goes commuting to work, so he can serve as an example for the kids in the neighborhood, the kind that he didn't really see growing up in a single parent home. And so that's like the full story. So there's 49 other stories like that in the book.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And again, for those of you just jumping in, if you have any questions, feel free to kind of drop them in the chat or even unmute yourself. This is kind of fireside chat, Zoom style here.
Yeah, if you any questions about concepts or other kinds of stories from the book, it's a Monday afternoon. We can be as creative as you guys want.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm a teacher, and so I'm just kind of curious, among your 49 stories, are there some qualities and practices among those teachers, maybe in those that were working with those students, that sort of shine through over and over again that you could share?
Yeah, and so there's many ways to take this question. The main thing I'll say is that teachers who also were able and supported to find the passion in their work really were able to kind of connect with their students on this relationship-based aspect. And I say that because as a sociologist studying educational opportunity gaps, we know that a lot of times in lower resource schools, teachers are kind of bogged down by the system and they have to teach to the test. They have lower quality equipment. But where teachers felt this ability to be a little bit more flexible and less constrained, they really thrived. One story I can talk about is a novice teacher in a low income neighborhood. She was having trouble with a lot of her students, and my mentor, this is a school from my extended research. My mentor, Dr. Pedro Noguera, actually went to consult with the school, and he kind of just sat down with the teachers, and he sat down with this novice teacher and asked her, he asked her what it was like to teach there and what it felt like, in the community of the school. And it came out that after the bell rang, a lot of the other teachers kind of got in their car and drove home to a neighborhood that wasn't near the school. And so he invited her to kind of take a look around the neighborhood, profile the community, spend some time there and see what you notice. She noticed that a lot of the homes in the community had gardens in their front yards and their backyards where people are growing their own produce. And so being a earth science teacher, she created a lesson around measuring lead in the soil for her class. And so they all went to their homes and neighbors' community gardens and brought soil samples and noticed that there was higher concentration of lead, higher than safe. And they were kind of able to make a map of where there were highest concentrations of lead. They presented this work to their school, and also this plant that may have been leading to some of those pollutants in the air. The plant changed a lot of their policies, gave students some internships to kind of go study with them and work with them. And so that was like an example of how students developed a love for science and literacy broadly. And so another school I profile in the conclusion of my book is called the James Baldwin Transfer High School in New York. And I'll quickly just say that this is also a Title I high school. All 99% of the students are of color, qualifying for free and reduced lunch, yet they have a very good rolling graduation rate, so students can graduate at the pace that's right for them because it's a transfer school. And what I mean when I say teachers getting to teach the way they want, they have courses that are extremely vibrant and exciting, like Islamic art and mathematics, the abolition of racial slavery, and they also have this course called Dracula and Gender Identity. And so courses that the teachers are excited to teach and that the students are excited to take, and students don't get reprimanded for having their phones out, but are warmly encouraged to put them away if they're wandering the halls. The teachers know what class they're supposed to be in. And so little things like that kind of transcend the resources is the zest for kind of meeting your students at the table and learning with them, I think goes really far.
Could I ask a question?
Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, so Mary Albert from Nevada here. We're looking for a strategy to empower student agency through bringing all the community to bear to support the teachers in getting creative. And one of the ideas is to form coach teams around the students, that some of those coaches are from the community, the mentors, the career areas, that you were talking about, giving them exposure to ideas outside of their own realm. Have you seen examples of that in your 49 case studies of who's doing that well, wrapping around the students with community coach teams?
Definitely. I think that's incredibly important, especially in the schools where you might have students and parents who have lots of diverse needs. I'll kind of give you a broad answer so you can try to pick and choose which parts are most relevant to your question. One school that comes to mind, so in the conclusion of my book, I profile schools specifically, so I can talk about creating a culture of student agency at the school level. And it might be good to give you a definition of student agency too. The way I define agency is a student's ability to navigate leverage resources to navigate obstacles in their life. And so that's kind of this idea of lifelong learning, if you will, kind of prepping students to be successful, not just in the class, but in college, if they choose to go or able to go, and career. And so the school that does this amazingly is Medgar Evers College Prep in Brooklyn. And I like this story of Medgar Evers because it's a school that took about 10 years to turn around, below 50% graduation rates 10 years ago. And today they're higher than 90%. Title I high school, all students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and are 95 or higher percent students of color. And the reason I give those demographics are because there are other parts of the country, maybe because they're bogged down by systemic issues, that you show educational stakeholders that this is the profile of a school. Most likely, we're not going to guess that school is doing amazing. But this school, I would say, through the visionary leadership of their principal, Dr. Michael Wiltshire, took about 4 years to turn around, but now they're like firing on all cylinders. So some of the things they did was they extended the school day for parents who have multiple, jobs and could use the extra help with childcare. They were able to leverage some adult literacy classes to provide that kind of a dialogue with the parents. This is a resource that they had that was really beneficial, is that Medgar Evers College Prep is very close in vicinity to Medgar Evers College. And so they leveraged this relationship with the college and got students to come in and do after school programming, things like magazine making, music recording, machine shop learning. And so they're also thinking about academic content very broadly. And so those mentors who would come in from Medgar Evers College Prep are also students from Brooklyn, so that might be relevant. And so the students and the young students in the high school are bonding over interests, over music, over not just math and science. And the younger students, they told me that having these mentors of color that look like them, dress like them, sound like them, really helped broaden their viewpoint of what success could look like for them. And so that's one way in which kind of students can start to develop the culture. Students are provided cultural competency so that their gifts are also recognized and awarded. And then I would say that they also brought in a lot of AP classes, and all students are encouraged to take them, even if it takes like a while for a student to get caught up. All students are encouraged to take APs pretty early, which is something that typically more privileged schools do, and that there are mentors supporting them at all levels. The last thing I'll say is that a lot of the schools I profile, the principals and the teaching force are actually not of the same racial background. So I would say that what matters most is the ability to connect with students over interests. The James Baldwin High School that I mentioned, Brady Smith, the principal there, is a white male, but he's the guy in the hallways who knows where every student is supposed to be, which class they're supposed to be at. So he's calling them out and calling out what classes they're supposed to be in. And those students remember that after they leave too. So I think if you can kind of get to the crux of relationship building, a lot of which is interest based, that's like the recipe for success in the coaching teams. And I think I saw someone ask for the definition of agency again. It's the way I define student agency is a person's capacity to leverage resources to navigate obstacles and improve their life for better. And it's a little long definition, but I think it includes both social and individual level considerations for success.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you, Mary. Any other questions? And can you confirm the name of the school again?
Yeah,
Dr.
so two schools. One is James Baldwin Transfer High School, and the other is Medgar Evers College Prep. And another thing I'll say while I'm just rambling on is that both of those schools are named after iconic Black civil rights leaders. And so in this time of very tense racial relationships, racial climate, these students are also developing a sense of racial pride when, racial politics are a little complicated. They're kind of being taught that there's concrete ways that they can figure out what success looks like through the mentors, as well as abstract ways through the curriculum, which is racially sensitive, and these schools that really adhere to the visions of these iconic leaders. And yeah, Medgar Evers is Medgar. Medgar, last name Evers, Evers, college prep, and the James Baldwin Transfer High School, the second of which is in Chelsea. First is in Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
And time is flying. We have maybe 10 minutes left here for the Q&A. So if you have another question, drop in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself.
And then I'll also say to Mary, while other people are thinking of questions, there's something to be said about like big brother, big sister coaching teams. So the more young people can get involved, even students of a high school, like if a 12th grader can help to tutor or mentor a 10th grader in the school, that helps both the 12th grader and the 10th grader. So the more you can involve young people in teams like that, I think the better everyone is.
Thank you for clarifying that, Doctor. I was wondering also when some people are concerned about the security issues of having mentors and coaches from the community and that whole, sensitivity to student safety.
Yeah.
How do you get around that? And do you use virtual coaching spaces for that?
Do you mean related to the health crisis or broadly with kind of background checks and stuff like that?
Even before the health crisis, there was concern about the safety and security of the children and the mentors and coaches in the community.
Right. So that's where I think taking advantage of the school space is incredibly important. If there can be a diverse coaching team with other adults who have been very vetted, I think that's great. At the same time, it's like this, as long as the conditions are safe for safety, I think it's an interesting opportunity to give people a chance that they might not typically get. And so again, Dr. Pedro Noguera, my mentor, his work is the one that I kind of try to follow. And so his work is very stories based. He has a story of how there was a neighborhood school that was getting vandalized a lot. Things were getting stolen. And what they actually did was they figured out which kids were vandalizing the school, and they were younger kids who had a lot of time on their hand, and they employed them to be security guards of the school. So kind of flipping this idea of ownership of the school. And so they were able to employ these kids who were then protectors of the school. And so it's one of those things that student safety is first and foremost, but how can we also challenge ourselves to think of what opportunity looks like for other people, I think is very important. And again, virtually, I would just say that all of this is also relationship based. And agency benefits from students being able to ask their own questions, kind of go become a little researcher, figure out different ways you might find the answers to your questions, and then also different ways that you might demonstrate what you've learned. And so in this day and age, students have Instagram, they have TikTok, a lot of that stuff goes over my head, but how could we use those things that they're already spending their time on to show what they've been learning? Because as the world continues to get more technologically advanced, this kind of remote learning is also going to be very common, I think. And so anytime students can kind of be in that driver's seat, and we kind of broaden our idea of what the standards look like that we're grading on or assessing on, I think we're doing great work.
Not to hog your time, but I have a question on that, because we realize that the ability to open up the agency and the self-directedness is recognizing what those broader standards are and how the kids are working towards them. So we're talking about personalized learning plans, and they get to choose what they're working on, what skills they're building. Have you seen a good example of a school that is really done that well with reframing the goals so
Yeah.
the kids have some agency around achieving them?
100%. I would say some pillars to agency are student autonomy and also goal setting. So having students set goals for themselves and then checking in to see how well they're doing on their own goals. And that last part should be done from a standpoint that's warm but demanding. So if we can warmly but demandingly enforce that students are adhering to the goals they've set for themselves, I think we have a great recipe for student agency. And in terms of personalized learning, I think two things are very important to personalized learning. I think one is this interest piece. That's half the battle for personalized learning, to really assume that children are each individuals who care about different things. And the other half to personalized learning, I would say, is like the challenge-based interest and challenge. Like, are we challenging students at the right pace that's right for them? And so if we can do the interest and challenge piece to personalized learning, I think that's one way to get to agency.
That's a huge way. And we call it like learning on the cusp of their abilities and their aptitude and their interest.
Nice.
So, it's a learning curve. Everyone's on their own learning curve.
Right.
Are you seeing an example from your case studies of who's closest to achieving that dream?
It's tough. I think the schools in New York, for instance, that are really able to do personalized learning really well are the most well-resourced schools that kind of embody these early college environments. Like Alphabet School is one example. And all of those magnet schools that are public schools in New York City, what is it called? Stuyvesant High School and Bronx Science. They really are doing personalized learning at that level. And so the schools that I mentioned already are the ones who are kind of fighting back against the opportunity gap to be able to bring that into their own school with limited resources. And so I think that's a systems question, is how can we incentivize veteran teachers to go into lower resource schools, and how can we mobilize teacher teams across schools to share best practices? Those kinds of things I think we need at the systems level.
And Mary, I'll give you a plug. The second keynote tomorrow for Aurora, I get to facilitate, but it's Bright Spots, and there's 7 district schools around the country that'll be featured really concretely, I think, and a nice diverse range of settings and approaches. So I'll give a plug for the second keynote tomorrow, Bright Spots. We really wanted to get tactical on how people are doing this in action.
Excellent.
I'm not sure how to break in, or even if there's time.
Go ahead, Gary.
Hi there. Hey, thank you so much. This is amazing. And my question is kind of a tangent question. So if it's too far off tangent, just go ahead and just, tell me so. So I'm talking about here teacher attributes to be able to do this type of work. And I work in the field of behavior intervention with kids, but over and over and over again, basically what I'm doing is actually coming in and trying to build capacity with the adults to have that warmth that you're talking about, a relational orientation, kind of unconditional positive regard, and ability to manage their own emotions so that they don't trigger and get defensive.
Sure.
And with kids, and and also to kind of increase their flexibility and creativity to be able to do all this work. It really, over and over again, I find that I'm put in the position of coming in because of kids, but I'm building adult capacity. So my question is actually just, in your ramblings through all of this, have you run into any great programs or resources that you would point me to kind of as models for really helping that adult capacity grow?
Yeah.
In these areas?
Sure. The first one I've just started learning about, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is Avid, the organization Avid, Advancement via Individual Determinism, and they kind of build capacity within schools. And so Avid is a great model. I'm just starting to kind of be familiar with it. I'm going to keynote, I think, a public event for them December 5th. Arnie Duncan is also going to speak at that. Avid is a really good model. They're mostly based out of California, but they have a kind of a pathways approach to education where it's also when you're in Avid, you're kind of a part of the community through college as well. To make sure that college persistence is there. One small program that he would be excited to hear me shout them out is called STEER, for student athletes. It's a program in upstate New York in a low income community. And so the CEO of STEER, Joe Durney, what he does is he's actually finally expanded to 2 or 3 schools. He only had 1 school. And over the last 8 years, he's gone from having 4 or 5 high school students to now serving 100. These are student athletes that they serve. Basically, what they do is they provide college and career readiness programming to them in and out of school. And what they do is they also find funding to incentivize the teachers who are already in the school to take on a little bit more work if they feel they're able to. So the teachers know the students really well, and now they're able to build a relationship with those students on the basis of sports, but with the idea that all of these students are going to go figure out colleges where they can play the sport of their choice, and also mostly go there for academics. And so Joe is really starting to scale STEER. I think it's a really good model of how you can empower staff, but you also have to incentivize staff. You can't just give them more work to take on their already taxed days, but how can you help broaden the work that they're doing and kind of meet them at the table? So I would say STEER and Avid are 2 really good programs to potentially look at.
Have you had much experience with mindfulness for teachers and teacher self-care and anything like that that kind of grows the teacher capacity to
definitely
be calm and to kind of help co-regulate kids when the kids are
100%. I'm really happy you said that, because it reminds me of this conversation I used to have with some schools a few years ago when grit was becoming like the word of the day. We would push back on the educators who were very quick to want to measure the grit of their students by saying, well, maybe we should also measure the grit of the teachers. And so that kind of makes people, pause for a second and be like, okay, well, I guess you're right. We should really see that whatever we're enforcing upon the students, we are also doing ourselves. And mindfulness is one of those great ones that I think everyone can benefit from. Just that self-regulation, that like taking a deep breath when things are really stressful, I think is it's extremely evidence-based as working for adults as well as young people. And so that seems very natural if you were to build in some kind of mindfulness practice early on in the school day, that teachers would also participate. It's kind of weird when teachers don't jump in. It's more of a power position that they employ. And so mindfulness is a really good example, because I think anytime we're like, oh, we want our students to be grittier, be more mindful, display growth mindset, we should also be asking, how are we supporting our teachers to do the same?
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Sounds good. Well, Dr. Kundu, I know we're at time. Any parting words?
Honestly, what I would say is that these are obviously incredibly challenging times, but it's also kind of like an opportunity to take up to the challenge and teach the way we've always known we should. A lot of these things are just like fundamental to being human, finding commonality in that human experience, and teaching the way you would like to teach that you've always wanted to. And so that's I think like the way we can live up to this challenge. I think that agency pays dividends. If you can support student agency, you're supporting them for the rest of their life. We need to change the idea that success looks like leaving your community. Maybe success looks like going back to your community like Jay Stud and offering a hand there. And so I think the stakes are high, but we can meet them if we just kind of teach to the way we know how.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Well, everyone, a little virtual clap. Thank you again for joining us there.
Well, thanks everybody. You can find me on Twitter, and my website has tons of free articles and resources I've written about student agency and how to do this work. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And everyone, if you feel like being a book club geek, we'll let people filter out a little bit. We have a few kind of reflection questions that I prepared with Dr. Kundu. If you read the book, great. If you haven't read it, all good too. But it really brings through many of the themes and key topics of his book to kind of just discuss, like, classic book club fashion. I used to be a high school English teacher, so this feels a little bit at home. So before we jump in, would love to get a little sense of who's in the room. If you could just drop in the chat of like where you are, where you're coming from, what are you up to in terms of school district or organization, and then you can kind of jump in.
I guess I'll go since we have wait time here.
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of joined you guys late. I'm on the West Coast, so our schedule is a lot different. I work in a school district as a instructional coach and behavior specialist. And like I was saying before, I get called in because of kiddos' behaviors, but really what I end up doing is trying to build capacity with adults to be more creative, to do exactly what our presenter was just talking about, trying to find agency and trying to find the common interests, build relationships and warmth, and really help that kid feel valued and excited about learning.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'll note people in the chat. Crystal, 8th grade language arts teacher, Central Texas. Welcome. Lindsay Jackson, high school science teacher in Iowa. And I was a weird one. I used to be an English and science teacher, so I can empathize with both of you. Sean?
Hey, Chris. Good to see you again. I've met Chris before. We've worked together in the past. I live in London now, and so it's dark here, and kind of multitasking is why I have my camera off. It's 7 p.m., so kind of cooking dinner and doing multiple things.
Let's squeeze it in.
Moved over to London with my partner who started grad school over here. And then while I was over here still looking for full-time work, my former school network reached out with to kind of see if I could support some of the teachers in some of the virtual learning and distance learning that's going on, because everybody, their 8 or so campuses are all distance learning right now. And so I'm kind of supporting teacher capacity. So I forget who asked the question, but that was a really good question about building teacher capacity, especially right now when it's like you're learning on the fly and it's kind of baptism by fire. But really just actually kind of stumbled into this this conference today. So didn't read the book or anything like that, but happy to kind of jump in on some of these sessions.
Awesome. Good to see you, man. And Stephanie, virtual Spanish teacher, South Carolina. Welcome. And Mary with the Education Innovation Collaborative. Self-preneur, love it. And manifest their full potential to contribute with their community. Appreciate you joining us. Holly and Fred, you there? All right, no worries. We'll go and jump in. So if we were live, Holly, awesome. Learning design coach from Georgetown in the place with us. So we were doing this in person. I always like to use kind of like the turn and talk kind of setup. I'm not going to do that just because like breakout rooms in Zoom are kind of weird because you all Zoom off and then you come back and etc. So we'll just kind of use wait time in a really comfortable setting here. And I kind of pulled prompts and things from the book as well. So again, if you haven't read it, no worries at all. Just kind of speak your truth and from the heart. So in the very introduction of the book, Dr. Kundu speaks about Tupac Shakur's poem, The Rose That Grew from Concrete, to shift from a rose in concrete to believing schools or gardens. And here's the actual poem itself. So take a second, read the poem to yourself, and then just think in terms of, you know, this mindset of seeing roses in concrete to a new paradigm of believing schools or gardens. What does that mean to you? If you have a reflection you'd like to share, feel free to drop it in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself.
So it makes me think of what Dr. Kundu said as he was leaving. Success isn't always leaving your community. Sometimes it's staying and making it better, giving back. That's what, you know, the rose and the concrete sort of reminds me of. The rose growing in its, you know, blooming in its environment and making it more beautiful, making it better. And I think that a lot of kids think that, you know, oh, I got to get out of here. I got to go somewhere else and make a name for myself. I've got to go to you know, New York or here or there, and I'm gonna, you know, make it big so I can, you know, make a difference when our own community can benefit from the things that they have to offer. And also I think the idea that they have to, or I think a lot of kids think they have to wait until they are older to give back or to make an impact, when really they can do that right now.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Mary mentions loves the paradigm of gardens, nurturing the inherent potential of every individual to beautify their own community. Are you going to add?
And can I add something to that, which I think it's greenhouses, schools as greenhouses, because you have to kind of protect the young seedlings. And as they're growing into the harsh environment of their community. So we're kind of incubating them as geniuses ready to flourish, but they need a lot of support and wraparound and coaching. And
someone's at the front door.
And so one of my questions about the growing the rose in the concrete is, how do we make schools be, the whole community be a nurturing space that removes some of the harshness of growing up in those environments? That's what I'd like to get better learning how to do.
Love it. Thank you for the reflection.
I like the idea of the crack in the concrete, because to me, the concrete represents the structures that are inflexible and kind of artificially laid up on top of the soil. So our school structures have become so artificial and restrictive and like concrete. I mean, so many things that kids have to confront are just these megalithic, inflexible, cold, just like concrete, just can't support life, meaningless bullshit, basically. And yet this rose finds a crack in the concrete, and there's always cracks. And underneath in the crack, there's soil and water and sunlight and all the things that that kid needs, that rose needs to grow. It's always there. And that's kind of what we have to do in schools, is like, look, our human relationships are there. Our love is there for kids. But somehow or another, we've just been buried in this concrete of structure that everyone's dying from. And how do we get through and find those cracks and widen those cracks and be the change educators who bring that soil and the air and the sunlight to do what kids naturally are born to do, which is to learn. I mean, they learn, but we've made it such that they're forced to now learn things that we decide is the structure, the big people, that these are the things you have to learn. So it just completely shuts their learning down. And then we have to like try to engage them when what we've done is just kill their natural learning. Just like the rose, you know, it finally finds the right crack and it grows, because that's what it's supposed to do. Just like kids they're born, we're all born to learn. So how do we change that structure?
Thank you for that. You got a shout out from Sean. And Lindsay just noted in the chat, reminds me of the students who have always been told that they're supposed to be good at sports, not academics. If they're going to go to college, they have to get a sports scholarship. Yeah, and
I just want to kind of echo what Yeah, I just want to kind of echo what you were saying, and that like the idea of, teachers working so hard to like engage students, but if you've ever met, as everyone has, like a 4-year-old, like they're curious about everything, right? And then all of a sudden by like age 6 or 7, like you can't, if they're sort of in that school experience that feels like concrete, they would rather be anywhere else, and I don't blame them. I mean, we've all been in classrooms that have no joy and no, it's sort of the teacher included, nobody wants to be there. And like you were saying, it just feels so opposite of, like sort of that innate curiosity that sort of all kids have.
John, I got to test. I have a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old, and so I live it. The 4-year-old cares about everything, and the 9-year-old, you can see his identity forming around this and whatever. And everything I've learned about growth mindset just like echoes in my mind all the time as a parent, of how I'll say like, I'm good at this and I'm bad at that, and trying to just reframe it and keeping that growth mindset. But it's so easy because, yeah, it's him in like tween world. He's always like trying to almost like imprint an identity on himself. And as a parent, you're just like, no, you can.
And that's almost why I found myself like going into education, because I felt that way. I definitely didn't realize it at the time, but like as I've grown older, I realized like I sort of had never, like, I didn't have that educational experience where like a teacher helped me like discover what I was passionate about, or like any, particular thing. I never wanted to be like, have this drive to go be in this one field, or, do this one thing. And it's just like, I think that shouldn't be the case, for students to have that experience.
I appreciate it. And Crystal made a shout out here. It makes me think of kids who just want to know what they need to do to get an A. Is it the right answer? Just tell me how to do it in the way you need it done. So thank you, everyone, for your sharing. This is a fantastic group. I was afraid I'd just be staring at myself the whole time. So thank you for jumping in with this. And for those of you that just joined us, my apologies to disappoint. Dr. Kundu was here the first 30 minutes, and then he had to head off to another engagement. So we're doing a bit of a book club reflection. If you haven't read the book, no worries at all. Just jump in and kind of speak your truth. And so to that point, he speaks a lot in the book around just fundamental belief in all students' potential. How can we begin the process of creating systems of collective belief in the potential of every student? This reminds me of some of the keynote that really focused on the mental model. But any thoughts on creating systems?
I'm thinking that the way that's working best for collective belief in every student is showcasing the students doing the work, learning about their community and solving problems in their community together. Because I've seen, I don't know if it's in the book because I didn't read the book, I apologize, but that when students are given a challenge that is exciting to them, like improving their community, then they can showcase that to the community and to the broader district and state to say, look, we're solving our own problems. And that's shifts the collective belief. Chris, was there a case in the book where an example of that was shown?
There were many parts where the theme, I would say, is almost as though not a helplessness, but a sense of like, oh, I got to wait until I'm older before I can make that kind of change, versus the agency piece. And my work with Dr. Kundu was the interplay of identity and agency, just like realizing, no, you could be a change agent right now. And actually, you do have the power to change your community. But until students have that experience, whether personally or a mentor or someone else in the neighborhood, they might not even see that as part of reality. They can just feel more like this is the system, or this is the concrete, or this is like what I'm born into. And the important to have those experiences so that you get this sort of like like self-actualization of kind of like, oh, I can change my life. Amazing. But the need for signals to that, and then they can really kind of run in that direction in a new way that they might not have seen before.
Yeah, there's no better way than learn by doing
Just learn by
and experiencing it. And so that, I think our challenge is to figure out how to have our schools be ecosystems that involve all of that action learning, and demonstrating to themselves with coaching support that they can do it. So I think that's a wonderful, I love the self-actualization term that you brought up.
Yeah, and reflection, big picture learning Nashville is one of the keynotes and the bright spots tomorrow, and they'll speak a bit about it, but a lot of place-based, community-based projects and intentionally, and I think the term they use is like inbound and outbound. So you can have like outbound stuff from the school to community, but also where do they listen to the community around the school on how they can help? So it's not also this power dynamic of the school doing things community, but also like this symbiotic kind of setup with the mentorship. And I think Iowa big as well does some of that. I've heard a few schools have kind of like this inbound, outbound kind of dynamic. Great. Other thoughts in terms of creating a system of collective belief? Something like the mental model.
Yeah, I think that it goes to like finding everything important from the little things to the big things. So even like, I mean, the language that teachers use around the school, like about students or with students, and or like what it looks like when you walk into a school. I think it might be a bit of a generalization, but you can almost tell, 20, 30 minutes into when you go into a school for the first time, how teachers feel about, the potential of every student and how students feel about the potential of every student. So I think sometimes, people want to go to these, like jump to these big grand ideas right away, but it's also like creating like, a physical environment and just like a space in the school and in the classroom where like you can point to tangible things that you're listed. Like these are examples of how we show our belief in the potential of every student rather than just sort of an abstract thing in the mission statement and all of that. It's like, okay, well, if this is our mission statement, where does that show up in our school on a day-to-day basis?
Love it. And a note in the chat, Renee Hill, beginning step is to accept students as good enough just as they are, instead of making them earn good school experiences or being good enough. Love that. Renee, you want to put any color to that? Feel free to stay on that.
That was it really. I just run into so many students who feel like they're always proving or they have to earn a decent school experience. Whereas if we just welcome them as they are and treat them as deserving, I think their experience would be a lot different.
Appreciate that. Sounds good. Let's go to the next question here. Another quote here, Kundu writes, if you're going to influence someone, coming from a place of kindness can create immeasurable positive change for the future. So how can we challenge ourselves to show more kindness and strengthen relationships with students, even if we're stressed? I think some of this came up in the conversation. I know, in COVID-19, just things are shifting everywhere for the adults, let alone the kids, school boards, and those type of dynamics. So any thoughts on just trying to bring a place of kindness and relationship?
I'm in my first semester of grad school, and something that I have noticed recently is as teachers, and even as student in high school, it was always, next year your teachers aren't going to accept this. Next year you won't be able to turn stuff in late. I'm just preparing you for the expectations for next year. You're not going to be able to get away with this with your teachers in college. This is what your professors are going to expect. I have to say, the professors of both of the courses I'm taking, when there's a due date in class, they say, this project is due tomorrow, but if you need some extra time, take it. If there's something going on, let me know. If you can't make it to class, just send me an email. And so this idea of, we've got to prepare the kids for the real world, and we've got to teach them responsibility, and, we can't accept late work. And if we do, we've got to take points off, and all of this. It's just, as now a graduate student, I'm not seeing that at work. If I'm going to be late, I can call my supervisor and say, hey, I'm running late, and they'll, figure out a way to make arrangements for me. And I just think, if we want to call it kindness, or if we want to call it decency, or whatever, just offering those same opportunities to our kids will make a big difference in what they are willing to do for us. And again, I think it can just be, doesn't necessarily have to be, kindness or giving them this big break, but just, what would we expect as professionals, or what would we expect from our colleagues or from our friends at work? I think it's okay to do that for kids. I don't think that it's, being soft on them or not allowing them to learn to be responsible, but just showing them that, hey, you're a person and I'm a person, and sometimes things happen and it's okay. We'll, kind of get through this. And then I think that when I do that for my kids, I see that the next time they're willing to work so much harder, because they recognize that it's not just about the grade, but that it really is about, connecting with them and watching them grow.
For that, Carrie?
Just at the risk of talking too much, you guys can shut me up if you want.
Go for it.
I think that this gets back to adult self-care, because if you look at the secondary level in junior and senior high school, teachers have 150 or more kids rotating through their party, and they're setting up 5 to 7 parties. I like to call it parties, like wedding receptions. I mean, it's complicated. They've got 20 to 35 kids rotating through their classroom every 55 minutes, cleaning up, setting up for the next one. And they're pressured to get a curriculum done, achievement measured, and move them on to the next one, and manage all of the behaviors that kids have, and meet all of the standards, everything. It's kind of an ungodly setup for the adult. It's just really unsustainable at the personal level. And we don't really ever look at that structure that adults are being asked to work in. So to me, the question comes, number one, how can we change that structure? But number two, we're not going to change it anytime soon, to not have like one adult in charge of 150 kids. And they get burned out and they stop being kind, even if they started that way, just because the structure creates that. Then an intermediate step is, how do we help adults really take care of themselves in that context, so that we are practicing as an institution's adult self-care that gets back down to the mindfulness and recharge, and really putting practices in place that become part of the system for adults to actually be able to access their kindness in that really, really very unsustainable situation. I'm trying to figure that out right now in my work.
Yeah, I would like to agree with Carrie there, and just jump off of what she just said as a teacher and as a department leader for my teachers. I've never seen a time when so many people are on edge, from student to parent to teachers to guidance counselors to prince, all the way up. I mean, I've never seen in just a short amount of time so many instances where things got escalated that could have easily been de-escalated at the classroom teacher level. It's really interesting to watch. And of course, we know why it's like that. Everyone is just on edge in general, and increasingly so as we move forward in the next few weeks and months. But the piece that Carrie just shared about just I think challenging ourselves is one thing, but just supporting each other. I know one of the things that we're doing in our department is just really trying to support one another and remind each other at the end of each week, hey, go close everything up, recharge, rest, do something that renews yourself. Just allowing time to vent with each other so that we're not venting to, or unloading that on students or parents. Just some of those kinds of things, just from the teacher perspective, and of course, encouraging those and just speaking it out loud as a leader teacher, or a leader, above the teacher level, I think is really an easy way to start to help some of those things. It at least has helped in our realm to help start to de-escalate things and start to remember the need for kindness and grace, and that we're all in this kind of same boat of madness right now.
And if I might build on that, what Stephanie and Carrie said, I taught a course on a prototype course for teachers on social, emotional, and academic development for themselves that they could then model and work with the kids in the classroom. And what I think came to the forefront in this class was what Carrie said about the ungodly nature of the setup that we have, that it's truly unsustainable. And no matter how much you are an involved, enlightened, mindful human adult, the system is going to wear you down and drain constantly. So what we're working on now with this Education Innovation Collaborative is the idea that you need to offload that responsibility to the student themselves, because they're the only one doing the learning. And if we empower and unleash their agency, you de-stress the accountability on the teacher and the parents, actually. And so you spread the responsibility out, but give more empowerment to the student. And so I think if we can use this crisis, this breakdown of the system, this pandemic's pushing us to realize that the system has to flip and how to empower the students. And so I guess one of the things I'd love to hear from other people is how do we, and when do we start shifting that responsibility down? Like, what age child do you start to say it's your responsibility to learn, not me making you learn? Any ideas on that?
Renee, I see you're unmuted. Do you have a thought?
Well, we've seen it happen as young as kindergarten. We had a school that was, doing some personalized learning, and it freaked the teachers out because everybody learned to read faster than they thought a kid could learn to read. But kindergartners, the teacher had a rotation, appointment rotation, and they told her that didn't work for them. They needed to schedule their own appointments. So they, did a Post-it note system. So I think they probably have it when they come and we work it out of them. So we can figure out a way to give it back, I guess.
That's beautifully said. They do have it within themselves. We just need the system to support it. And has anyone seen a scheduling system where kids can sign up for, classes or content from teachers, like a college level registration for learning, that they have some autonomy around that? But even from kindergarten, I've heard this before, Renee, that it's possible to do it. I'm looking for the system that would nurture that across all teachers, so to speak.
We didn't have that for our core curriculum, but from the school I was at that was K-5, we had our Wednesdays were early release days for teacher PD at 1 o'clock. And so we kind of flipped it around, and on Wednesdays, then the last hour and a half of the day, it was teacher and student choice of like a sort of mini units, and teachers could basically design the class they wanted to design, and then students as young as kindergarten selected which one they wanted to take. And so it was like within grade level bands, so it wasn't it was like K and 1 and then 2 and 3 and then 4 and 5 kind of thing. So there was some mixed across grade levels as well. But that was, and even though the choices were limited just based on the realities of staffing and that type of thing, students absolutely like loved it, and teachers did as well, because you were free to teach and learn, whatever it was, and I didn't have to relate to anything, in the standard curriculum.
My school does something similar during our advisory periods on Fridays. Well, last year we did it Tuesdays and Thursdays during advisory. We called it club time. And every teacher on campus created a club based on, our own interests. So I taught dance. There were other teachers who had a cooking club or knitting and crocheting or, gaming, Disney obsession club. I mean, all sorts of things. And kids got to sign up for whatever club they wanted to attend. Clubs were mixed between 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and they got to change their clubs every 9 weeks. And so we haven't started it yet this year. As we know, this year is all sorts of crazy, but hopefully we'll get it going second semester. It was really interesting and a lot of fun.
Yeah, doing a quick call out. Lindsay noted in the chat, how do you do that in a system that doesn't want to change? Any thoughts on reflections on how to create, I guess, an urgency for change or desire for change?
My first thought is, seeing those really great examples, as mentioned earlier, of like the Medgar Evers college prep in the different schools, where you see the local, really amazing models and examples, and then you have that concrete example say, look, it's already done once, let's scale it up. So kind of a bottom-up approach. But obviously that's an impossibly hard question. That's not it. I didn't solve the problem.
Yeah, but that's how we approach it. Quick time, we have about 8 minutes left. Got a few more prompts here, but another part, Kundu talks about actively teaching kids how to best ask for help when it's most appropriate and beneficial to seek support. So what are some simple ways to teach students the importance of asking questions and how to ask for help?
Hey, if I could just mention something about Lindsay's that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like the author was talking about this a little bit, about how the teachers who were the most successful at facilitating student agency were the ones who felt the most supported, who felt they had the most flexibility to do so, and who felt that passion was sort of supported, that they have. And I mean, I hate to say it, but at some point, if those things are being stifled in you as an educator, it's going to burn out and die. So there's always a time when you might need to leave, and you might need to find an environment that is more flexible and encouraged. I really do hate to say that, because, if you've tried and tried and tried and tried again to be creative and to be flexible and to really try to support some of these things that we know benefit students, and you continue to be stifled as an educator, I do believe there comes a time when you have to leave and seek out maybe a different opportunity, so that your own passion as a teacher or educator, whatever level you're at, doesn't die.
Or go upstream, like become an administrator, because a lot of times people become administrators because they are innovative teachers, and they find that their innovations aren't supported by the system, and are also actually resented by peers, by some peers who actually kind of just have the cookie cutter down, and they've got their lessons down, and boom, 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 this is how I always do it. And then there comes an innovative teacher, and they're just like, what the heck is going on with this? What are you doing? You're making too much noise over there, or whatever. That's not how we do it. And so I think going upline and becoming a school administrator can really be a gift to the field. If you've got that passion for supporting teachers to be innovative, to reach kids.
Yeah, and I'd say personally, I'd build on both of those. My work here in Chicago Public Schools, there's a personalized learning school designation now, and there's about a same we can be IB or dual language, you can be personalized learning. And we really do see a dynamic of teachers searching for other schools with that designation because they have a very strong philosophy around student agency. And if they move into one without it, it's, it's in tension with their values, in tension with their administrator, things like that. And then exactly what you say, Carrie, another dynamic of teachers just trying to become principals and then taking a school and turning it into a personalized learning school and then attracting it in its own way. So it's been a really cool dynamic to see over the past 8 years. It was kind of like maybe 20, 30 schools, and it just has kind of continually grown as people have kind of seen the power to it. And I think Mary, you mentioned of like putting more of the agency on the students versus all the burden on the teachers. And I think that's also where we see early signs of longevity of teachers staying in the career profession longer in these settings.
And I like what you're saying, Chris, about offering those environments, and it will attract the teachers that want that environment. So you give the teachers choice as well. It's not taking the whole school and converting it, and no matter who likes it or doesn't like it, I think that's more problematic. But I like what you're doing in Chicago area with the personalized designation. Can you mention like a school that's doing personalized in Chicago that's a model for that?
Yeah, there's plenty that come to mind. One that sticks out for me is Belmont Cragen Elementary School. So it's a high needs student environment, and actually part of the city with some of the highest COVID cases. But the principal there, Stacy's, I mean, she's probably one of the best principals I've worked with in my life. She, incredible community engagement on the design of what they wanted school to be. So it really was, to your greenhouse analogy, school was a community center, not a place to drop your kid off for daycare and learn and come back. And like, you just saw the entire community shift its mindset to school partnerships, and even people in the community without kids in the school getting behind that and where that shifted. And so they've seen, when Dr. Kundu speaks about his cases in New York City, Belmont Cragen always comes to mind for me in Chicago, a school that really turned itself around, and went from like a, on probation to one of the top designation schools in the city. And when you go in there, I think the coolest part is the parents and the kids are the ones that talk about it. It's not the staff. So I think also for the long game, like it has real staying power around it. But I do give real credit to Chicago Public Schools with the personalized learning department and the designation. I think it made them go from, doing something cool to like an official thing of like, this is how school runs, and having the authority to continue with that. So
is that Cragen? How do you spell?
I'll drop it in the chat
Okay.
real quick. And also realizing we're at time now. So to kind of wrap it up, one huge thank you to everyone for engaging with this while you're probably in the middle of like life, stuff like that. Quick note, I dropped it in here. This is my previous collaboration over the summer with Dr. Kundu on Identity and Agency guidebook, which actually was also with Brooklyn Lab, the Center for National Learning Disabilities, a few different universities. But really, the heart of it came from, we felt like everyone was talking about Chromebooks and technology in this time of COVID and being like, we got to get agency and identity out there. So there's a whole chapter in there from Dr. Kundu on kind of like some key concepts and things. We also spoke to some Montessori experts that I think really spoke to, like, instead of teacher plus 25 kids times 8 periods, how do you change up that equation and thinking about that? So there were a lot of really good tactical things within that. Obviously, his book is available at Amazon and all major realtors, so feel free to check it out. He does have a few TED Talks as well. So if you want to just kind of get the like 6-7 minute synopsis to share with staff or yourself, Dr. Kundu has 2 TED Talks around equity and agency. And the last thing is there is a poll. Thank you, Jessica. That was spot on timing here. If you just take a click, give us any kind of feedback. All hopes that Aurora Institute will be back live and in person next year, but we have no idea. So any feedback on just the format of the book talk and everything would be super helpful as we consider even other events we might do during the year in this virtual setup with different authors and people in the field. And with that, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please be well.